The Planning Commission podcast is a spirited discussion with myself and a couple of my longtime colleagues in the profession. Our discussions are based solely on our own opinions and do not reflect the opinions or views of our employers, the American Planning Association, or even our alma maters. So grab a seat in the back of City Hall, dig out an old copy of Robert's Rules, and for goodness sakes, read your packet. The Planning Commission is now in session.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Planning Commission podcast. Today's episode, hope my commissioners are ready. Here comes the sun.
Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes. I was so hoping you would do that, especially Jess, the musical one.
I got this.
I know.
I love some Beatles.
We have been hearing about your musical accolades for 15 episodes, well, maybe 13 or 15, and it finally came shining through. I have to tell you a quick story.
Do it.
Last weekend, oh my gosh, what a proud dad moment I had. Speaking of the Beatles, right? Because my stepdad and my mom were in town, and there was this Beatles tribute show, and everyone's a fan. And my youngest daughter and I, our song that we dance to is at night, before bed, is In My Life. And so we went to the show, and this little 6-year-old girl, man, she was just having the time of her life. And we were in this really cool theater, and all the people around us are just like, they are lighting up because of her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a guy leans forward and he says, "Enjoy this because it doesn't last," I'm like, okay. So there came time for the guy who was, Paul. He says, I've got a t-shirt to give away, right? And so he has one t-shirt for the whole crowd of 3,000 people or whatever it was. And
that's the life of a cover band, right? One t-shirt to give away.
Exactly. Well, of course, he's trying to get food money for his next gig in Seattle. So, so my daughter and my wife go down to the bottom, down right in front of the stage, and she's just got her arms up, and he's teasing like way too long. And he gives her a wink from stage, and he throws the t-shirt right at her. And here's my 6-year-old just with this massive t-shirt that's, a 2XL or whatever it is. And so she slept in it that night, and she was just over the moon, man. It was such a cool moment. So anyway, that's a long story, but nevertheless, here comes the sun. Today, we're going to talk all about renewable energy, solar, wind, right? All the different things that hopefully we're slowly and maybe quickly, hopefully, right, getting toward in a better and a cleaner environment with somebody who really knows this space, obviously a whole heck of a lot better than we do. But commissioners, I have a question to ask you first, and I'm excited about this question. You are in a survival situation, and you need energy, you need heat, and you need something to cook with. So you have to burn something. Which of the following would you take with you if you had to? A, any random general or comp plan written in the last 10 years. B, a traffic impact study for a Chicago area Walmart. C, an environmental impact statement required in the state of California for a 3-foot sidewalk gap in San Francisco. Or D, your annual AICP renewal invoice. And why?
Oh, I'm going directly with that comp plan because of those things. Even the environmental one, I think that comp plan,
it's a little ridiculous. It's got ample, it's burning for out and days, right?
Listen, one time I wrote an LRTP. I don't know, I was in charge. And
LRTP is
going long range transportation plan. And
yes.
Look, we had like 3 streets. I was like, this does not need to be 170 pages. So I was really adamant that it be like 60 pages. But the problem is there was like the model and all this other like technical information. Who reads that? And so I put those in an appendices and put it on the shelf. And I was like, if somebody needs that, they can find that later. But the plan itself was 60 pages of here's what to do and here's where to update the code. And it was just, I'm still real proud of that. Okay. And it won an award.
Brief can be good, right?
I
brief
feel like
can be good.
Brevity is genius, right? Something. There's something
We
about
have
that.
we have a company in our neck of the woods who will remain nameless, who is notorious for doing long range plans, transportation plans, right? For towns of like 400 people. I am not exaggerating when it's like thicker than a phone book for those of us old enough to know what a phone book is. And
Oh,
90
sure.
I know 90% of it is just tables and graphs. And you know, the locals are like, whoa, look at that. Wow, that's what? And it's
Yeah.
just a bunch of numbers that nobody
And
knows.
the ped bike section is one page and
I
one
know,
map
right?
of where things are and where they ain't, but it's a comprehensive transportation plan that's 400 pages long. I'm going to go with the traffic impact study. One, because
Walmart in Chicago.
we could kind of debate the relative meaningless of all those documents you talked about, but at least within a single city, there's likely to be fewer actual copies of that comp plan than there are copies of useless traffic impact studies, because how many do you see in your P&Z meetings every week? Right. And they're all done like 8th grade book reports where we're like maximizing the font size and the margins because we know there's not much substance in what we're writing, but we have to make it look voluminous.
Yes. Our hearing on Monday, our hearing on Monday had a packet that included 950 pages. Of that 950, I'm going to safely say 350 to 400 was 2 traffic studies. And yes, but to their credit, we finally had a half a page dedicated to pedestrian trip, generation, which I'm going, oh, what? Be still in my heart. We're not just forecasting, 2045 and the right turn lane. So anyway, our audience is like, these, what are we talking about? Some people get that, right? But
do you know, like probably everybody, all 17 of the people that listen to this podcast, they probably just skip this first part and they're like, we're just gonna fast forward to when he tells us a good whiskey, and then they hear something about something horrible like the Dickel one. Anyway, that's the worst one.
All right, so
I would go with
what are you burning in the desert?
Even though I'm not an AICP, nor will I ever, because it is my fork in this, my stake in the ground, as all of you know.
Against the man. You're such a Generation Xer. Jeez.
I'm pushing back. I'm an only child. I get my way, damn it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with the AICP renewal invoice because I think the seething heat and anger inside of me would help it with a flame.
It would just burst, contagious
blue hot. It wouldn't even just be yellow, right? It's just torching whatever food. Oh yeah.
What do they call those stars? The red dwarfs or the blue dwarfs or whatever.
Oh anyway, yeah, the dwarf.
I'm not an astrologer, but I think that's what you call them. Astrologist.
Something like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I took
Close
a class.
Yeah.
This is because I didn't have a real planning education. I'm not a classically trained planner. I didn't take astrology. So
but you have your AICP, so therefore because
they'll let anybody in, it turns out.
I know.
If the check processes.
That's right. Don, let's move forward. What is our whiskey pairing for Here Comes the Sun? Every time you're
regrettably, I searched around the greater Boise area and our state-run liquor stores to try to find this one because it's from Richland, Washington, which isn't too far from here. And it is, I'll hold it up, from the distillery Solar Spirits.
Oh, that's a good one.
A single malt whiskey, and their distillery is completely run on solar power.
No, that's amazing.
I have to try to find this. I'm going to be in Seattle this weekend. So I'm going to be looking for this. So I might be a few days late in terms of recovering the actual bottle, but we're going to go with the Solar Spirits American single malt whiskey from Richmond,
I like
Washington.
it. I like it. That's a good one. That's a good one. Good job on that one. I'm proud of you. Way to go, K-Man. All right. So let us turn our attention to our fabulous guest. Our guest knows everything there is, and we're putting the pressure on her with solar and wind power and all the renewables and this incredibly important effort that we are putting forth in this country and the globe for all the reasons that we're going to get into. Our guest is, and I'm going to tell her, I think we need to truncate her title a little bit because I'm going to give her the title. Ready? It's Senior Project Manager at the Graham Sustainability Institute at the School for Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan. I need a better title. That's the better way of going, right?
Here,
Like,
you know
mine's
what she
short.
is? You know what that sounds like? A Swiss Army knife.
That's right.
I think that's what you got.
Or a sustainability badass. And we're welcoming Sara Mills. Sara, welcome to the Planning Commission podcast. Good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, that you don't speak too soon.
Yeah, I was like, we haven't started.
I agree. Actually, I usually don't tell anybody my title. I'm just Sara at University of Michigan.
Perfect.
There you go. So Sara, let's just start off with the basics. Tell our audience who you are, your general background, and it's a good one. I've read through a lot of your bio and stuff and all the different things. You are a planner's planner, and I love it, and we're excited to have you. So go ahead, let it rip.
I try. So here with the long title at the university, I do applied research. Most of it studies the impacts that large renewable energy projects have on mostly rural communities. My PhD is in urban and regional planning, because they don't offer PhDs in like farmland preservation, but that I came back to school to study farmland preservation. So I focus a lot on rural. I don't know. I try to go after interesting projects. So I also look at like how state and local policies, think zoning, affect renewables deployment. I do get down into the nitty gritties a lot in terms of zoning, helping local governments kind of across Michigan's urban and rural spectrum set policies related to clean energy. So every state in the country has an energy office, and the energy office in Michigan, the state energy office in Michigan, gave me a grant to survey local officials across the state to figure out kind of how they're thinking about energy and what tools and resources they need. And we've been spending the last couple of years giving them those resources. So this summer we did a solar guidebook, solar zoning, everything you ever wanted to know.
Did it include the whiskey though? Like in the
It did not. It did not. That would have been perfect. Like
That's how you get people to
placement.
public meetings. That's how you get people to come.
I've
to
always said we need to serve beer, like free beer at like open houses, and just like let everybody take the edge off, and then DOT is going to give a presentation, and then the questions are more like, listen, we're real upset about this median in front of my business, so you can't turn left anymore. But what I'd really like to know is, could you guys have a better IPA next time? That's where my public dollars need to go. But no,
and the DOT engineers will look at you and go, "We brought natural light. What else do you want?" So
speaking of natural light.
Well, it's not natural. It's not natural light, but I was going to say Budweiser. There's kind of an uproar a couple of years ago. There's a lot of folks who don't like renewable energy, and Budweiser for the Super Bowl was talking about how their beer was 100% wind powered. And so there were a whole bunch of like pour out campaigns, like protesting Budweiser beer. Yes. Yes.
There's how it's made. Jeez.
Anyway.
Okay.
Oh god.
I would say I think it's wind powered from feeding the Clydesdales that beefarino or whatever
Yeah,
that
that's
Seinfeld episode was. Yeah. Anyway, all right, back to the subject at hand. Sara, you talked about the work you do kind of across the spectrum of Michigan community. So why rural town, rural area, big city? Why should they be caring about solar and wind energy?
Yeah. Well, the reason that they should care and why planners should care is because it's coming. The cost of renewables has come down so much across the country that, I mean, like it or not, however you feel about, 600-foot tall wind turbines or solar panels on somebody's roof, like utilities are looking for it. Homeowners want to put solar panels on their roof because they pay for themselves quickly. So that's why they should care about it. And I spend a lot of my time in rural places, and they're really thinking about renewables from an economic development perspective. Like they're not necessarily doing it from climate reasons. I'm imagining that,
well, what are they seeing in that? What's that economic development angle?
Yeah. So what they're seeing is that usually it kind of is a little bit different for wind versus solar, but the person who has solar panels or wind turbine on their property receives lease revenue from that. So my dissertation was like looking at wind energy as a farmland preservation tool. And so finding that people with wind turbines on their property are reinvesting that money into their land.
Yeah, right. I mean that I had some family out in Iowa and they put a cell phone tower on the farm because it was lease, whatever, it was lease revenue. And it was like, well, that's one way to do it.
Farm
So
diversification.
I'm telling you, and I live up in Alaska, and one of the things that we deal with out in our more agricultural areas, kind of in the south central part of the state, is that's folks' retirement plan, right? They're going to sell their farmland when they retire to a developer who's going to turn it into a neighborhood. And we have, we definitely don't have enough housing up here, but it's one of those things that it's like, well, now our farmland is going and going and going. So it's, and we're, we're sort of isolated up here. We need places that we can grow our own food and food for our animals and all the things. So, and I'm probably getting some of this wrong. So folks out in Palmer, you just go ahead and write me a note. But anyway, so, it's one of those things that when I realized that, I was like, oh, I can see why this is an issue. So having other options for revenue on a farm that maybe you need to retire from, that would be fabulous. If you just didn't want to sell and you wanted to keep the farm in its state, but couldn't continue to operate. So what I'm thinking about are, we've been having a lot of conversations with some really cool people, Sarah, and something that keeps coming up is that there are regulations that actually make some of the things that we would like to do as planners and community developers illegal. So what are your pain points and regulations that you're finding in towns or cities, or you said a lot of rural areas, so maybe counties? What are you finding those regulations that are just prohibiting renewable energy generation?
Yeah. So, and I'll give you the total. That is a lot. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to start by doing the academic, I'm going to bound what I'm about to say because it varies from place
I need
to
some
place.
assumptions.
No.
I need some assumptions.
I'm going to start at the 30,000 foot level.
I'm not going to start at the 30,000.
We're going to work.
No, go for it.
And then we'll peer review it.
Yeah. Oh. I mean, I'm a lousy academic because because
you're in applied research. Because you're in applied research. I know exactly why you think you're lousy. It's my favorite.
I give the communities the information they need, and it never gets in a journal. It's
perfect.
So I know best kind of the Midwest and kind of what the policy or what the hindrances look like, kind of depend on what your technology is. And I mean, we talked a lot about rural, and I'm happy. That's where I spend most of my time. But I should say I have some additional credentials that I bring to this podcast in that I am a planning commissioner in the city of Ann Arbor.
We know.
Well,
I know.
welcome, guest
we're getting
commissioner.
there. We're getting there.
And so we are very urban. And so I'm actually going to throw the city of Ann Arbor under a bus for a moment
beautiful.
in terms of thinking about restrictions. So the city of Ann Arbor doesn't have very much open space. The place for our renewables is rooftop backyard solar. And for a while, our zoning ordinance didn't mention solar. And then in the state of Michigan, and this is true in, I don't know, half of the other states, silence in a zoning ordinance means it's not allowed. It's different from state to state, but here we are in a state where silence means it's not allowed. The staff had been interpreting ground mounted backyard solar as just another accessory structure until somebody wanted to put solar panels in their front yard, the extra front yard, not in the required front setback, but between where their house was and that setback. And their neighbors were really mad about it. And so city council asked planning commission to review front yard solar. And we were like, well, if you can build a garage and put solar panels on it in your front yard, why not just put the solar panels? Screen the ugly side, the back side. And city council effectively said, no, we're worried about property values. And I should tell you that there are not studies that front yard solar panels decrease nearby property values, right? But council was concerned about it. And we are in a city that has declared a climate emergency, and we plan to be carbon neutral by 2030. Anyway, it is total hypocrisy.
Well, you've got an acre and a half of a football field in that town that some would argue isn't very well utilized. So, I mean, has that ever been talked about?
Wow.
We also have some golf courses that regularly there's plans for
don't touch that rail. I've touched that rail on Twitter sometimes, and it is pretty funny to watch.
Yeah. So in terms of the what is restrictive, I mean, in in towns, it can be just like, are you treating ground mounted solar like any other kind of accessory structure? I haven't seen this so often, but early on, people weren't in Michigan. There were a couple of places that weren't allowing roof mounted solar panels on the roadside of, the view. It's a big thing. Like there's lots of homeowners associations that limit whether or not you can put solar panels on your roof.
Why?
Aesthetics. I mean, that's the argument, but I gotta say, like,
wait a second.
So the big protruding garage that's mooning the street is not an issue and not detrimental to property values, but all of a sudden a solar panel is going to throw it into a tizzy.
Or the beige, that horrible beige that every house is painted in that neighborhood. Come on. I have some aesthetic problems too, and it's not solar panels. At least those kind of look shiny and a little sparkly. I'm into it, but there was a development that came before Planning Commission. I don't know, it's probably a year ago now, and we specifically asked about this because we have a carbon neutrality plan. We're trying, but we're also limited by what we can require in terms of energy efficiency. We have a state energy code that kind of hinders what we're allowed to do. So, Planning Commission asks where it can, kind of what is possible. And this idea of rooftop solar came up, and they were like, oh, that's not allowed in our bylaws. And we're like, oh no, do you realize where you're building this development? Like, this is a city like that.
So what's your biggest success on that front? I know there's like that challenge, but where have you found the opposite?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I am huge into consistency. So in all of this, saying like, if you are allowed to build a lean-to and put solar panels on the roof, like, why not put solar panels on the roof? We've also in terms of other things that you can do, we've amended our height ordinance to allow solar to exceed height limits, right? To try to expand this, to try to encourage like solar carports over parking. We've done a lot of things to try to make that a little bit easier. If you're not adding imperviousness, then you don't have to go back through a full site plan review and like reconfigure your parking lot for stormwater and all of that. So I think that there's a number of things that we've done.
Yeah.
We're actually, to be honest, in like next week's planning, I haven't fully read my packet yet.
There's time.
I know, but next week's planning commission meeting, we're taking up a bunch more of solar ordinances because we've got a new council and it's a new day.
Well, and I also serve on our city of Boise's P&Z, and like, one of my strings that gets pulled is drive-throughs, and my fellow commissioners have heard me mention this, I think, but I'm sitting here going, and I said it the other day, we had one in front of us. Now it was actually recommended for denial, but I'm just going, how is it that we are a city who is doing all of these things with regard to climate change and emissions and trying to do everything in our power to convert to, electric vehicles. And then in one fell swoop, I approve a drive-through and all of that goes out the window, right? Because you have hundreds of cars storing up and queuing, and it's just like, holy cow, there's a talk about a disconnect, right? Like one drive-through pretty much could ruin all of those efforts.
And I would almost argue like the coffee drive-throughs of today have much bigger queues and more dwell times than the traditional fast foods that have been the vitriol of that stuff. Yet those things are happening all over the place.
But why? Because we're tired, because we can't walk around in our cities, and it's pitiful, and I have allergies. I don't know.
And we're
I'm just exhausted.
We're addicted to these faux sugar drinks that we call coffee, but that's another episode.
Well, I was going to say drive-throughs, like we've got the thing in Ann Arbor, we're like, well, if it's EVs in the drive-through,
okay.
God, we're some total nerds on this, aren't we? Let's adjust in our reaction.
Oh my gosh.
So Sarah, I got to ask you this. I'm curious, you talk about, I know you are in the sort of the front line, if you will, talking with a lot of citizens and rural communities and all communities, across the country. I heard you, in full disclosure, at a national interview through NPR. And so you're definitely at the tip of the spear of this. I'm going to ask you sort of what surprises the average person, regarding how sustainable energy sources work and their needs. I know one thing you had mentioned on the interview with the carport and elevation and the system and being close to the capture source. That was sort of interesting to me. But I'm wondering if you could touch on that.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that surprises most people is just that in energy transition, like moving to solar, there's lots that need to be done in our cities, but you can't just close an old fossil fuel plant and replace it with the same amount of solar panels. The footprint of that energy generation function is really different. So it's solar takes about 50 to 70 times as much land. Wind turbines take about 5 times as much land, but you can't pack those wind turbines cheek to jowl. Like the wind needs time to recuperate between them. So like a wind farm to generate the same amount of power as a fossil fuel plant, like, electron for electron, it takes about 1,000, it spans like 1,000 times more acres. So I think that's the idea, that when we're talking about renewables, that we're really talking about rural energy is the thing that's different. And for better or for worse, there's not tons of planners that are rural planners. Or people in the energy space like that are really thinking about rural areas. So this is why I get called to do things on radio.
Well, like in a city like Ann Arbor, where you said there's not a lot of open space, have they done, or are you aware of a city that's done a calculation of here's kind of our rooftop space that could collectively serve that without really upsetting too much? Is that a thing?
It is a thing. And Ann Arbor, because has this like audacious goal. And PS, we just, at the election on the other day, we just passed a climate millage. I think it's like one of the first, like we're taxing ourselves to try to get ourselves carbon neutral. We can get about 1/3 of our power from within our city boundaries. But this is the other challenge, right? Like it's way more sustainable to increase density, right? Like we know that increased density, like we're cutting down on emissions in lots of ways. But you have less rooftop then per person. And so as our cities get more population and get denser, like it is more efficient, but it means that you can't be 100% self-sustaining. Like you're gonna need to get that power in from a rural area. And so it's, we need both. We need it all. Every rooftop needs to have solar on it. Every surface parking lot definitely should have some other use going on. But we're still gonna need wind farms and solar farms in rural areas.
That's that myth buster thing to get out. And I think it's good. It's something even in the planning profession of here's kind of the reality of this idea and why it isn't ideal, once you dig below the surface. So in that work, what have you seen more success? Is it coming with regulation, incentivization, subsidizing? What's the package there that is the measure that what gets us to success?
Yeah. So early on, subsidizations were really important for wind and solar, kind of federal level tax credits. And some states and cities have them too, but that was really key to getting the technology adopted early on. And, with experience, that cost kind of comes down. I think on the coasts, kind of the states on the East and West Coast, there tends to be more people and also more appetite for regulation. And so like there's lots of studies showing that, requiring utilities or requiring utilities to get renewable energy has led to additional adoption. But in the places in the center of the country where I am, it's really incentivization that's led to more renewable development. Renewables are a huge economic opportunity for communities. And so when you have some policies, like property tax policies that sweeten the deal for local governments to want to say yes, I talked about like the people who have wind turbines or solar panels on their property, that's part of the economic development. But the other part of the economic development is that in most states, wind and solar developers pay property taxes. And that's a community-wide economic benefit. And so you don't want to cut all taxes on renewables. Like you don't want to cut local taxes because that's a key reason that communities say yes and pass ordinances that allow for a wind or solar farm. So it's those kind of incentivization. It's that sort of financial incentive that I think has led to the deployment in the center of the country, also where like kind of the heavy hand of regulation is just not.
But it's funny you bring up
Not
here in a
important.
question in this topic on property tax policy having an impact. And we had Dr. Richard Jackson on a few weeks ago from CDC, and he's been on about the healthy environment stuff. And he brought up property tax policy. So here's this kind of other side of this that isn't seeming to get a lot of traction on that. Jess, you got a question?
Yeah. So I feel like I'm asking this question a lot. So sustainability has this idea that it's a liberal issue. It's coastal, it's liberal coastal issues. You know, this is not about us. This is not about rural or whatever. And then of course we've been picking this out and going, oh my gosh, what a good revenue generator, what a good economic revenue generator for rural landowners that are looking for some options, whether they're still operating those rural lands in a particular way, or they just want it to still be there. So is this concept, this perception sustainability, do you think it's shifting into a this is about everything and everybody, like we have some options here? Or I don't know. I don't know if I'm really asking this very well, but I think, Sarah, you know where I'm going.
Yeah, I totally do. And I think it depends on the language that you use.
Okay, yeah.
So if you're talking about sustainability, I mean, I
Mhm.
still think that that's sort of kind of a liberal coasty kind of
Yeah.
thing. I mean, it's less polarizing, I think, in the center of the country than it once was, but it's
Yeah.
still the places that are hosts of big wind and solar farms, like this is rural economic development.
Yeah. It's
Like
the rural Midwest.
it's the rural Midwest. I mean, I call it the wind belt, kind of from the Dakotas
Yeah.
down to Texas.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
is like this is I mean, actually I have a data point from Michigan, which is I sent out surveys to all landowners in kind of 10 places with wind farms. 60% of people who have wind turbines on their property don't believe in climate change. Like
Yeah.
they are doing it for economic reasons, right? And
Wow.
that's like, this is their farm diversification strategy. And I would say that renewable energy development is probably like the biggest economic opportunity that a lot of these places have seen in decades. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the planning question here like is really important. Like it's an opportunity,
Mhm.
but how does it mesh with the other goals? Like, you
Well, I
know,
think if you went into a comprehensive plan for counties, you would find farmland preservation
Mhm.
as a top goal in all of them. But I think the conversation would kind of end at some viewing that concept as antithetical to whatever the political bend on it is. And I mean, we have that
Yeah.
here in Idaho. We're an agriculture state. Agriculture drives our state. Well, let's give those farmers chances to keep that thing going because
Yeah.
of this wind and solar energy. Oh no, that's a liberal, blah, 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 blah. You immediately tilt to that
Yeah.
when there's no reason the two should be intertwined that way.
yeah, well, and in fact, like, I mean, it's mostly red states that are hosts. Like
Yeah.
politically, like it can be polarizing, but like it's
Yeah.
not right now. Like honestly, like the counties that have wind and solar are not, you know, tend to be kind of more conservative. Where I thought you were going, Don, is we say a lot of our master plans or comprehensive plans are going to say like, you know, we care about farmland preservation, but they might also have like a community character. Like people mean different
Yeah.
things by farmland preservation, and this is where it's hard. And
Yeah.
actually a lot of my work is identifying that sometimes the divides or where there's conflict in rural communities over renewables, it's the same kind of issues that that gave rise to right to farm laws, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, this is not my version of how I think that land ought to be
Right.
used.
Mhm.
And I liked that you were growing corn and soybeans, and I don't like that you're now, you know, farming the sun.
Farming. So, yeah. And
Well,
you know, it's one of those things where I mean, as the farming industry just has so, especially smaller farms have got so many complex financial issues that they're dealing with. And if we're just going to tell people, no, if we're going to preserve farmland in our comp plans, but we don't give another option, and I feel like I've said this over and over again, but if we don't give another option for revenue on that land besides turning it into a subdivision or selling it to a commercial developer or whatever, like if it can't be a farm anymore for wheat and soybean, can it be a farm for something else? And what does that look like? And also, why can't it be at the same time, right? Like, I know it can't be right there in the middle or whatever, but I mean, like my example with the cell phone tower, it sits there and there's soybeans all around it.
Well, the same is true for wind turbines, right? I
Why
mean,
not?
you can
They're
farm
quite
right
tall.
up. You farm right up to the base. Solar's a little bit different.
Well, yeah, sure. It needs to be kind of sitting there.
Yeah, there's agrivoltaics. Have you guys heard of this? This is the idea of
I
stacking.
did in your interview. I learned about that.
This is amazing. Stacking what? Tell me more.
So stacking agriculture and energy. So there's already like kind of what's out there now. There's solar grazing. There's
density.
actually a solar.
We can't have that. Right?
Oh,
I know, right? There's a solar
Wait.
grazing association. So you can you want to graze sheep, not goats, because goats are jerks and they chew on wires.
They'll eat the solar.
Totally. So solar grazing, there's also planting pollinator habitat. So
yes.
But I mean, what's hard is that the farmer, like there's very few bee farmers or honey farmers, right? Like already. So it's shifting kind of what your idea of farming is. There's a lot of research going on too to see if you can grow shade tolerant crops underneath solar panels.
I mean, I have some ideas. I just
well, I know for me around here, having been around this vicinity, it's been a hot topic. Our area in the Treasure Valley.
Hot topic in the shade. Okay.
But because we have grown so fast and so many people have moved to this region, our region, to Dawn's point, has been talking about ag preservation for years. And the way I've said it is, we're really good at growing houses and planning to grow houses. We suck at trying to make sure we can keep planning to grow food, and it's like but when you mention the economic tools and say, well, what if there are districts where the property taxes are, for example, maintained a certain level where everybody else's continues to go up, and then people go, well, that sounds great, and then they go, well, but that means it's going to shift to the typical homeowner. Oh, that's horrible, right? And there goes that. And then, the buying of the property, and how dare they? Well, what do you mean? They can't even afford to live on this property anymore, So there's some, and the other thing I was going to tell you too is, having grown up in the West and watching the Colorado River and all these places where electricity generation is dependent on the Rockies, the snowfall, and the water going through all the hydroelectric dams. And guess what? When you're starting to see, bodies turned up that the mob threw in Lake Mead because the water level's so high or so low, you're like, we got a problem. And your industry is a massive part of the solution, for the folks in Vegas who want those slot machines to keep on pulling, right, and making their money. So I guess my question is, I want to ask you, and we'll hit the lightning round in just a second, but in light of all of these things, are you optimistic?
I'm totally optimistic. Like, sometimes I come across as a Debbie Downer because I usually tell community, and I get everybody upset with me because I tell communities every energy source has impacts, local impacts, positive and negative. And so I always talk about the negatives, like even renewables, have negatives. But I'm super optimistic because I think, particularly from a rural perspective, that that renewables are providing an opportunity Chris, to what you were just talking about, providing those landowners who see an opportunity and potentially selling their land for, low density sprawl, another option that still allows them to make money and retire. I do think that this is really opening up our horizons for both rural development and to clean up our power grid. I mean, parts of the grid are clean, but not everywhere.
Yeah, two goals most places would espouse to be about in whatever form. It's able to solve two of those things, and a lot of things we deal with can't even address one.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm optimistic.
There you go.
You gotta
Good.
be.
Even when I'm getting yelled at
Yeah.
planning commission meetings.
You
like,
should
Oh, yes.
resign. It's like,
Ugh.
oh,
how do
many
you
times?
sleep at night? I have gotten that. I've gotten angry letters from
like-
people where I come and talk who
You're
don't
like-
want renewables in their communities.
Right.
Like, how can you sleep at night?
you're like heavy
like-
medication.
So it's
I-
okay. You can admit you're part of the UN Agenda 21 on this podcast. We've all been,
Twitter's just gonna.
we've all had that label, and so
Oh.
go ahead. You can tell the world.
It's been a
So
long time. That is bringing back flashbacks. I haven't thought about Agenda 21 in like a decade.
Oh, well, you
Seriously, thank
see-
you very
Oh,
much.
that-
You're welcome.
You're just saying that. They know that. Come on.
that's what they want you to say,
That's
Sarah.
what they want you to think. Oh my gosh. Oh boy. It's so good. So I think it's time for our lightning round, right? And so
Yes,
we're
it
just going to
is.
ask
Let's
you some
do it.
fun questions, quick on your feet, give a little word association,
Okay.
Okay, so let's start with this. I want to know are you a Harry Potter fan at all?
A little bit.
Okay. You know what an animagi is? You know when they could turn into an animal?
Oh, okay.
If you could turn into any animal,
Oh,
what would it be?
Not
Oh,
a
goodness.
goat, I guess.
Not a
Not a
goat.
goat.
Goats
Not a
are
goat?
jerks. I love zebras. Actually, I sing to my
Oh.
children, I like zebra butts and I cannot lie. I like the way that their stripes come together. Anyway, I like zebras.
Perfect. I like it.
Wow.
Be a zebra.
So you're at the University of Michigan. Does the
Mhm.
academic side of that university get into the Ohio State football rivalry as much as the fans, or is it like two mules fighting over a turnip? And I
Wow.
guess you're,
Or
I guess
two
you're,
zebras
guess
fighting
you're- I
over a
guess you're-
banana.
That's a
Like,
new
I
what
guess,
you-
I guess your employment status might depend on your answer. So if you don't feel like answering that, you can't.
Every time there is some great research that comes out of Ohio State on acceptance of
The-
renewable.
the
The
Ohio-
Ohio
the
State, you
Ohio
come on,
Ohio
State.
State.
Come on.
yes.
I have to though tell my students like it's okay. Like not all things in Ohio are bad or all things about OSU. Anyway, yeah.
If your works cited includes an Ohio State piece, you're not going to dock them.
No, exactly.
So we have had over our episodes, I don't know why, but I think without question, the majority or a good portion, I should say, of our guests have come from Michigan. And so I
No
think
way.
I'm going to continue to
that's
ask
fair.
this question until someone tells me yes.
Shut
And my
up.
colleagues know the question.
Oh.
Has Bob Seger found his shelter yet?
I don't think so. I don't
Do
know.
you see?
I have no idea
Bob-
what you're referring. Right,
He's
okay.
hiding
You're
under a
Bob.
solar panel, Chris. That's
I would
the-
like, okay, this.
I am a real
this-
Michigander. I don't understand that.
Okay, you're going to now because you're
Okay.
not going to be able to unhear this.
Oh
While-
boy.
While you are finishing up reading your packet this weekend, my request of you is to play a little Bob Seger in the background, and you're going to count how many times he references shelter and his searching for shelter in song after song. And I like the Siegs, but it's a redundant theory or theme throughout his music. I'm as a Michigander, I task you now
You know
with
what?
finding that.
Chris,
Has it-
it's a psychological safety thing. He's just trying to talk about mental health, and you
It's tr-
are making fun of this, and I don't appreciate it.
Sidebar. If you have not heard the band Michigander,
You should.
you should go listen to them, even if you're not a Michigander.
Oh my
So I'll
gosh.
ask you this question. How about this? Your favorite Great Lake and why?
Oh.
Boy, there's a lot of thought here. This is
There
good.
is
There's
because
only three.
There's not
There's
three.
five.
there are
Oh,
five
sorry.
homes.
Sorry.
Huron, Ontario, Michigan,
Excuse me.
Erie, Superior.
Educate her, please.
Yeah.
Okay, there's
oh
only
goodness.
three that you should be picking from, and the first two don't count. So I mean, what's your favorite?
All right, go with
Sorry,
that. Whatever you gotta
sorry.
say.
Superior. I don't know this now. This feels very stressful. Superior. I like it's beautiful.
Wrong answer.
It
But
sounds
keep
very
going.
judgy though, Superior, doesn't it? Like in 2022, I think it needs to be renamed. We can't call it Superior.
Don't
I
ask
don't-
the
I
crew of
just-
the
Wait.
Edmund Fitzgerald that.
So listen,
Oh,
I do admit when I'm wrong or just like straight up don't know something. So there's five.
There are
Yeah.
five.
Yes.
Didn't you
Four
take-
of them
I-
touch
Yes.
Michigan.
Yeah.
Listen, I
Gently,
know
though.
I've read a
Gently,
lot
they
of
touch
books gently. Well, maybe that's what I'm thinking. Not all five touch Michigan.
Ontario's hanging out. Like
It's out
Listen,
there.
Yeah.
all I
Okay.
know,
It's half Canadian. It's
Exactly.
you know what I
Yeah.
do know? There are 5 Finger Lakes in the Finger Lake wine district of New York. And I feel like that's solid information.
So
Whatever you got to do to pull yourself out of your lack of geography.
Yeah.
That's what that works.
So I have a serious one.
Oh.
I'm maybe about 4 years from looking at trading places and going somewhere else, and Michigan's on that list. Where should I be looking?
Oh my goodness. That is a great question. Traverse City is lovely.
Ooh.
I love the UP though too. I mean, Escanaba.
I've been to Escanaba. I know Escanaba. Yeah.
Yeah. Marquette is lovely. Oh goodness. It kind of depends on what you're looking for. Like
How
what
many-
your
how
idea of
many-
a good place is.
I mean, I live in a cold place, but how many months of the year is the snow over 5 feet in Marquette? That's just what I want to know.
That's a really good, I don't
Less
know.
and less.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so Don is not an optimist. We're all gonna die.
I'm just saying.
It's
I'm
just
saying,
a
yes,
realist.
I agree with Traverse City. I like Holland. Actually, on the I forget the 2 cities. They're down from Escanaba. It's Menominee Falls, and there's another one. And I forget which one's in Wisconsin, which one's in Michigan. I like that area a lot as well. So I'll be seeking some real estate advice.
There's a lot of, I mean, climate migration is real, and Michigan and the Great Lakes states are great places to come for
Yeah.
climate migration. There's, yeah.
Very, very nice drivers in those states. That has been my experience.
Oh,
Yeah, they like move over when you merge onto the highway. I'm like, what? What happened?
that doesn't happen everywhere.
No. And you know what's amazing? I was in Missouri, and this was the first time I learned about Midwest drivers. Missouri. So in Missouri, I realized that on the highways, the can y'all hear all that? There's some children. There's some
That's all right.
kids. They're having a great time living in this. They have a good day. Okay, so I think they didn't make their hockey practice this morning, so they're all riled up. But anyway, so there is this whole and I have no idea what I was talking about because of the children. I'll tell you about the
Drivers.
children.
Missouri,
merging.
maybe it
Drivers.
was
Oh my
merge
God, yeah,
area.
yeah. Well, the children were building a fort at 3 a.m. last night, and it was hilarious. And I went out there, I was like, fellas, don't y'all have like hockey practice at 6 a.m? They were like, it fell down. We have to fix it. And this was the thing. Okay. So those merge lanes in Missouri, there it was short. And I was like, oh my God, I had my East Coast like anxiety attack. I was like, and there's this truck coming up at me. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to beat him. And he just nicely moved out of the way. And I merged. I was like, yeah, we could really save a lot of asphalt if we were just not assholes on the road. That's what I think. But anyway, okay.
Well, I'll bring it back to the front
Wow.
here. Michigan lightning round. Michigan U-turn. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Oh, this is not my
the Michigan
left.
Yeah,
Michigan left.
thumbs down totally.
Oh,
Your
I don't-
last,
You disappointed a lot of traffic engineers.
yeah,
That's a
I'm
good thing.
sad right now. Oh,
That's
your last.
That's your Dr. Hummer coming out of you, Jess.
you know
Look
what?
hard.
He's a good person. His heart's in the right place. And
Your last concert or next concert, whichever you choose.
Oh goodness. I'm really bad. We don't go to concerts as much as we should. We have like Top of the Park, which is like free concerts
Aw.
in city, which
local
is great.
folks.
There you
Local
go.
folks, totally. Yeah,
That's
that's
what I
what
like.
we do.
How
I
about
thought it was
this?
going to be Sir Mix-a-Lot after the
No.
Aw. How about this? What is your planning and zoning commission bane? What is the thing that gets underneath your crawl and you can't stand it? What is
Or
it?
if you're like
Everybody-
me and you get angry and you cry when this happens, that thing.
Yeah.
What does that happen?
Oh goodness. So sometimes rather than saying special exception use, people say special exemption use, and there's a couple commissioners. I hope they don't listen to this that say that all the time. Although maybe if they listen to this, they will stop saying special exemption use. It's a special exception use permit, people. Exception use.
That's
Special
what gets
exception
under.
use.
Okay,
That gets under my skin.
All right.
I mean, yeah, there's lots of things. That's the
we
thing.
all have them. We
Yeah.
have to hold back. And we had the other day. We had an applicant who flat out said something to the equivalent of, if your objective is to slow down the growth of housing that you're trying to get to, you're doing a great job. And oh man, I had to light him
Oh.
up. I had to
Well,
light him up. I wasn't going to take that.
Yeah, we have some people bang on the podium like, you shall approve this. This is what, and I mean,
yeah,
and
you get your free sandwich and they accuse you of making all this money and
we don't
you don't even get a sandwich.
Food?
Oh,
we don't
gotta
get
talk to
no, I need to talk to staff.
We got like kind bars. That was like the top of the budget there. You get a sandwich. Jeez.
we get
food.
Kudos to the city of Boise. You're all watching. Yeah, we get a up to a $20 allotment per meeting, and we have they pick a local restaurant and hey, here's the menu and make it fit, and there you go.
It's a great way to support local businesses.
Okay, yeah.
They're all the downtown ones right next to City Hall. So
while
there you go.
While single-handedly destroying them one permit at a time, right? Is that what you're saying? And I'm very optimistic.
There you go.
Oh
all
my
right.
gosh.
Well, I think with that, Sarah, we're gonna call this an episode. We appreciate, gosh, what a fun conversation this has been, and your insight is remarkable. We'll probably have you back at another point in time, no doubt about it. And gosh, we thank you for your time. We know you have a student waiting for you.
I think Sarah should do the honors to.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Good call. Here's the way we end our episode, and I'm sure you're going to be ready. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Perfect.
Second.
Excellent. Sarah, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. We got that student out there waiting that's coming into your office next, I know. But again, thank you for joining us on the Planning Commission podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It was really fun.
Good.
Oh,
Have a
thank you,
wonderful
Sarah.
rest of your day.
Thanks.
Commissioners, see you soon. We're out. Have a good one. Listener, hey, listener, that's you. Would you like more content? Well, if you would, check out our YouTube page, watch us there, go to our Facebook page, like us there. We do live episodes about every couple weeks, and all of our episodes are available on both of those platforms in addition to Apple, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other places where you get your podcasts. Tell us what you think. What about some guests or organizations that you think we should interview? We're game. Let us know. Thank you for listening. We appreciate it, and we'll try to keep up the good work. Now get back to your packet.